Well, hello to you today. Glad to have you back with us as we continue our study together in the book of John. And congratulations, we're on day 21 today. So we are officially 3 weeks in our study, and we're so glad that you've been able to join us thus far. Real quick, there's some information on the screen there for you to be able to contact us. If we can be praying for you about any kind of a need that you may have, we would love to hear from you. Also, if you have any praise reports you'd like to send along, we would love to hear those as well. So we're going to go into our scriptures this morning. We're going to be starting over into John chapter 6 today. And so in John chapter 6, we find in verse 1, the word tells us that after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him, because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. All right, so we find here that Jesus makes a journey across the sea, and it says a great multitude of people followed him because they saw the miracles that he did upon people that were diseased. And so naturally, when people begin to see miracles being occurred, they're automatically going to begin to follow and have interest. And so we find here that it says that this great multitude followed him. And so verse 6 says, Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? Now, Jesus asked a question unto Philip. He says, how can we get enough bread or food to be able to feed these people, all right, so that they will have enough to eat? And so he said, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And so in verse 6, it says that he said this to him to prove him, for he knew himself what he would do. So in other words, this was a faith test. It says that he said this to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. So in other words, he wanted to see what Philip's response would be. So he did this to prove him, but Jesus already knew what he was going to do. Verse 7, it says, Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. So we find here that basically probably what they had was 200 pennyworth in their treasury. So they weren't very wealthy and rich men traveling around with Jesus during that time. So they didn't have much. And so he began to think, there's so many people here, we don't have enough to be able for every one of them that they may even take a little. And so as we go back over here to the scripture in verse 8, it says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? A lot of times today people may find themselves asking the same question, how can the Lord use what little bit I have, or I don't really have anything, or I don't have much of anything, or maybe people find themselves today in a situation that they would think that they have a great lack or don't have an ability to be able to really be able to help somebody, but with the Lord in it, you can. And so it says in verse 10, Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number, about 5,000. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would. So 5,000 men were fed as much as they wanted. So it wasn't that it was rationed. There was an abundant supply there. Now, there's a reason why there was an abundant supply there, because the bread of life was on the scene, all right, the one that speaks, and it is. And so it says that Jesus took those loaves, and when he had given thanks, in other words, he prayed over it, he thanked the Father for what had been supplied and thanked him that he knew that it was going to be more than enough. And so it says that they ate as much as they would of the bread and of the fish. And so verse 12 says, when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Now, I want us to understand this. There was more left over than what they ever started with, simply because Jesus had blessed it. He took what seemed to be so little and made it into something so great. And he can do the same thing in our lives today, no matter what we may feel like we're lacking or what we don't have to bring or to offer. Bring what you have and offer it unto the Lord and watch him bless it and watch him multiply it. And so we find that it says that there were 12 baskets that were left. And so it says, then arose men which they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. Then Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king. He departed again into a mountain alone. Now, we find here in closing that Jesus had performed a great miracle that day. Now, remember, there was a great multitude that was following him simply because they saw what he had done for some people that had diseases. Now, suddenly, Jesus has fed 5,000 men with a little small lunch that a young boy had. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 5,000 people that Jesus has miraculously touched. And so we've gone from just the fact of people hearing and seeing him helping some people that had been sick and diseased to now he has blessed and multiplied what seemed to not be enough to be more than enough. And even to have 12 baskets left over, one for every one of the disciples, so they could have a faith lesson that day. Now, it's important for you and I to understand today how important faith is and that faith needs to grow in our life. So what Jesus did that day, he planted a seed of faith into those disciples that day. But we'll begin to look and study in the coming days and weeks ahead as we continue in our study here. We'll see how that faith seed, if it ever came of anything in their lives or when it became something in their lives. So, but you and I, we need to trust and believe the Word and trust and believe in the Lord and bring to him what we have and know that no matter what we seem like we may be lacking, when Jesus is part of the equation, it's always more than enough. Well, God bless you. I hope you have a great day today, and thank you for joining us for another study together. And please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you follow along with us, and we'd love to hear from you. So contact us through the information that's on the screen, and or leave us a comment or any information down below, and we would love to hear from you and love to be able to answer any questions that you may have. God bless you. Hope you have a great day. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow in our next study together.